The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is one of the longest-running and most complex conflicts in the modern world. It involves territorial disputes and national aspirations between Israelis and Palestinians. The conflict has deep historical roots and involves a range of issues, including land, security, and human rights. Understanding this conflict requires a look at its origins, key events, and the current situation. The conflict is not just a political struggle, but also a deeply emotional one, with both sides holding strong historical and religious claims to the land. Over the years, various attempts have been made to resolve the conflict, but a lasting peace remains elusive. The international community continues to play a significant role, often mediating talks and proposing solutions. Despite these efforts, violence and unrest persist, affecting millions of lives. The complexity of the conflict is heightened by the involvement of regional and global powers, each with its own interests. This has often led to a polarization of international opinion, complicating efforts to find a peaceful resolution. The conflict impacts not just the people directly involved, but also has broader implications for regional stability and international relations. The human cost of the conflict is immense, with both Israelis and Palestinians suffering from loss, displacement, and trauma. This ongoing situation continues to draw global attention, highlighting the need for a just and lasting solution. Understanding the nuances of this conflict is crucial for anyone interested in global politics, human rights, or Middle Eastern studies. The roots of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict can be traced back to the early 20th century. During this period, the rise of Zionism and increasing Jewish migration to Palestine created tensions with the Arab population. Zionism, a movement for the re-establishment of a Jewish homeland, gained momentum amid growing anti-Semitism in Europe. This migration was met with resistance from Palestinian Arabs who feared their displacement. In 1917, the Balfour Declaration further inflamed tensions by expressing British support for a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. This declaration was controversial as it was perceived to conflict with promises made to Arab leaders for their support against the Ottoman Empire during World War I. The declaration set the stage for future conflict by laying the groundwork for Jewish settlement in Palestine. The subsequent establishment of the British Mandate for Palestine after World War I formalized British control over the region. The mandate facilitated Jewish immigration, which was met with increasing hostility from the Arab population. Intercommunal violence grew, with both sides clashing over land, political representation, and national identity. These early tensions set the stage for decades of conflict. The conflicting national aspirations of Jews and Arabs in Palestine became increasingly apparent, with both groups laying claim to the land. The Balfour Declaration remains a pivotal moment in the history of the conflict, symbolizing the beginning of a prolonged struggle over national identity and sovereignty. The 1948 Arab-Israeli War, also known as the War of Independence for Israelis and the Nakba catastrophe for Palestinians, marked a significant turning point. Following the United Nations 1947 partition plan, which proposed dividing Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states, tensions erupted into full-scale war. The plan was accepted by Jewish leaders but rejected by Arab states and Palestinian leaders, leading to conflict. On May 14, 1948, the State of Israel was declared, prompting neighboring Arab countries to invade. The ensuing war resulted in a significant shift of populations. Over 700,000 Palestinians were displaced, becoming refugees in neighboring Arab countries or in the West Bank and Gaza. This displacement remains one of the core issues of the conflict today, with many Palestinians seeking the right to return to their former homes. The war resulted in Israel expanding its territory beyond the UN-proposed borders, while Jordan took control of the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and Egypt took control of the Gaza Strip. The armistice lines established in 1949 became known as the Green Line, forming the de facto borders until the Six-Day War in 1967. The aftermath of the war left deep scars on both sides. For Palestinians, the Nakba is a symbol of loss and dispossession, while for Israelis, the successful establishment of their state is a moment of triumph. This divergence in narratives continues to influence the perceptions and politics of both communities, complicating peace efforts even further. The Six-Day War in 1967 was another critical juncture in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In this brief but intense war, Israel faced off against several Arab nations, including Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. The war resulted in a swift and decisive victory for Israel, which captured the West Bank, Gaza Strip, East Jerusalem, the Sinai Peninsula, and the Golan Heights. These territorial gains dramatically changed the geopolitical landscape of the region. The occupation of these territories brought a new dimension to the conflict. For Palestinians, the Israeli occupation meant increased military presence and restrictions on movement. The status of Jerusalem, a city with deep religious significance for Jews, Christians, and Muslims, became one of the most contentious issues. Israel's control of East Jerusalem in particular has been a significant sticking point in peace negotiations. The Six-Day War also had far-reaching implications for Israeli society. It bolstered national confidence, but also led to debates about the future of the occupied territories. Some Israelis saw the newly acquired lands as a historical and religious entitlement, while others viewed them as bargaining chips for peace with the Arab world. This division continues to influence Israeli politics and society. Internationally, the war shifted alliances and perceptions. The United Nations called for Israeli withdrawal from the occupied territories, but the specifics of such a withdrawal have been contentious. The war and its aftermath entrenched the conflict, making it more complex and difficult to resolve. The occupation remains a central issue, affecting the daily lives of millions and continuing to provoke international debate and intervention. Section 5. The Intifadas, uprisings and their impact. The term Intifada refers to Palestinian uprisings against Israeli occupation, with the first occurring in 1987 and the second in 2000. The first Intifada began as a grassroots protest against Israeli rule in the West Bank and Gaza. It was characterized by widespread civil disobedience, including protests, boycotts, and strikes. The uprising drew international attention to the plight of Palestinians living under occupation. The first Intifada led to the Oslo Accords in the early 1990s, which aimed to establish a framework for peace and the eventual creation of a Palestinian state. The Accords gave rise to the Palestinian Authority, which assumed limited self-governance in parts of the West Bank and Gaza. However, the peace process stalled, and many core issues remained unresolved, leading to disillusionment and frustration on both sides. The second Intifada, which erupted in 2000, was far more violent, resulting in thousands of casualties on both sides. It was sparked by a visit from then-Israeli opposition leader Ariel Sharon to the Temple Mount, a site sacred to both Jews and Muslims. The violence and subsequent military responses deepened mistrust and hostility, leading to further entrenchment of positions. These uprisings had profound effects on both societies. For Palestinians, the Intifadas were a symbol of resistance against occupation, but they also resulted in severe economic and social challenges. For Israelis, security concerns increased, leading to the construction of the West Bank barrier and heightened military operations. The legacy of the Intifadas continues to influence the political landscape, shaping public opinion and policy on both sides. Section 6. Recent events and the current situation. In recent years, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has seen periodic escalations, most notably involving Gaza. The ongoing Israel-Hamas war, which flared up again in 2023, has resulted in significant casualties and destruction. Hamas, the ruling authority in Gaza, and Israel have engaged in repeated rounds of conflict, often sparked by rocket attacks and military responses. These hostilities have resulted in a humanitarian crisis in Gaza, with widespread displacement and infrastructure damage. The international community has been actively involved, attempting to mediate ceasefires and provide humanitarian aid. Recent legal rulings have also influenced the conflict's dynamic. In July 2024, the International Court of Justice ruled that Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories is illegal, asserting that the territories should be considered a single unit. This ruling has added a new layer of complexity to the already fraught negotiations. Despite these developments, the conflict remains unresolved, with both sides entrenched in their positions. Palestinian leadership continues to seek international recognition and support for statehood, while Israel maintains security concerns as paramount. The situation is further complicated by internal divisions within both Israeli and Palestinian societies, affecting their respective political landscapes. The ongoing conflict continues to affect the lives of millions, with no clear resolution in sight. The humanitarian impact is severe, with limited access to basic necessities and services in many areas. The global community remains hopeful for a peaceful resolution, but the path to lasting peace is fraught with challenges and uncertainties. Section 7. Key unresolved issues: borders, settlements, and Jerusalem. Several key issues remain at the heart of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. One of the most significant is the question of borders. The 1967 borders, also known as the Green Line, are considered by many as the basis for a two-state solution. However, Israel's settlement expansion in the West Bank has complicated this vision, with many settlements considered illegal under international law. The status of Jerusalem is another major point of contention. Both Israelis and Palestinians claim Jerusalem as their capital, with its religious and historical significance making it a focal point of the conflict. Israel's annexation of East Jerusalem has been met with international condemnation, and the city's status remains one of the most challenging issues to negotiate. The right of return for Palestinian refugees displaced since 1948 is also a critical issue. Millions of Palestinians and their descendants live in refugee camps across the Middle East, holding on to the hope of returning to their ancestral homes. This demand is met with resistance from Israel, which fears that allowing such a return would threaten its Jewish majority. Additionally, security concerns continue to be a major barrier to peace. Israel's security measures, including checkpoints and the construction of a separation barrier, have been criticized for infringing on Palestinian rights. Conversely, ongoing violence and the threat of attacks fuel Israeli security policies. These unresolved issues form the core of the conflict, making it difficult to find common ground and achieve lasting peace. Section 8. Human impact of the conflict. The human impact of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is profound and far-reaching. Both Israeli and Palestinian civilians have suffered tremendously due to the ongoing violence and instability. In Gaza, the situation is dire, with frequent military operations leading to destruction of homes, schools, and hospitals. The blockade imposed by Israel has exacerbated the humanitarian crisis, leading to shortages of essential supplies and services. On the West Bank, the presence of Israeli settlements and military checkpoints disrupts daily life for Palestinians. Movement restrictions affect access to education, healthcare, and employment opportunities. The psychological impact on children and families living in constant fear of violence is severe, with many experiencing trauma and stress-related disorders. For Israelis, the threat of rocket attacks and violence creates a climate of fear and insecurity. Many Israelis live under the constant threat of attacks, leading to a society that is highly vigilant and prepared for conflict. The security measures necessary to protect citizens also have social and economic costs impacting the everyday lives of those living near conflict areas. Efforts to address the humanitarian needs of those affected by the conflict are ongoing, with international organizations providing aid and support. However, the scale of the needs is immense, and without a political solution, the cycle of violence and suffering is likely to continue. The human stories of resilience and perseverance amidst adversity highlight the urgent need for peace and reconciliation. Section 9: Peace Efforts and International Perspectives. Over the decades, numerous peace efforts have been made to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The Oslo Accords in the 1990s were a landmark attempt to establish peace, introducing the concept of a two-state solution. However, the accords failed to resolve core issues such as borders, Jerusalem, and refugees, leading to further disillusionment. The Camp David Summit in 2000 was another significant effort, but it too ended without agreement. The Arab Peace Initiative, proposed in 2002 and reiterated in subsequent years, offered normalization of relations with Israel in exchange for a full withdrawal from occupied territories. Despite its potential, the initiative has not been fully embraced by either side. Various international actors, including the United States, the European Union, and the United Nations, continue to advocate for negotiations and propose frameworks for peace. The international consensus largely supports a two-state solution, envisioning an independent Palestinian state alongside Israel based on pre-1967 borders. However, political realities and on-the-ground developments such as settlement expansion have made this vision increasingly difficult to achieve. The International Court of Justice and other legal bodies have issued rulings that challenge Israel's policies in occupied territories, but enforcement remains a challenge. Despite the challenges, there is a persistent hope for peace among both Israelis and Palestinians, as well as the international community. Dialogue and diplomacy are essential for any progress, and continued efforts are needed to bridge the deep divides. The path to peace is complex and requires the commitment of all parties involved to prioritize dialogue over conflict, ensuring a future where both peoples can coexist in peace and security.